without further ado, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, I'd like to thank Danielle. I'd like to thank you for having me again. As I always say, the Chesterfield Chamber with the Government Affairs is bringing sexy back. That is for sure. And it's my honor. So you can catch my program on the mic with Mike every day, 5 to 7 a.m. on ESPN Richmond. We're a social enterprise business program where we talk about how business can help society be better. That's what we do. So we are joined with Caitlin Coakley of the 65th District running for office. Ma'am, I have a list of questions here. But what we do is start off, you tell us your story, who you are, what you do, and then we can go into these list of questions that they provided for me.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. My name is Caitlin Coakley. I am a writer, a mom, and an activist from Chesterfield County. And now I'm running to represent the voters of Virginia's 65th District in the House of Delegates. I grew up here in Chesterfield County. I got my first job at a Taste of Italy restaurant, which has recently closed due to the pandemic. I played softball in the local park, spent a lot of time at Rockwood, spent a lot of time at Bird Park. I went to Chesterfield County Public Schools, where my children now attend. This is my home. And I'm running because this region needs representation that works as hard as we all do. We have gone through so much over the past year and a half. We've had to adjust to new online models of learning and work. We've had to keep up with ever-changing health regulations. We've had to balance so much, and we still came together to lift our voices for workers' rights, for the safety of our public school teachers and frontline workers, and for racial justice. And now it's time to bring that leadership, the kind that has been forged on the streets, in the community, around the kitchen table, to the General Assembly. One of the reasons why I'm running is because this is the second big crisis I've lived through. In 2009, I got my first job as a newspaper reporter. I was a recent graduate of Hollins University, and I was working for a paper covering state and local government, and specifically the intersection of business and government. So Danielle, what you said as far as all policy coming back down to business in one way or another, that's something that I know possibly better than anybody else, because that was my beat for years. And we saw the ways in which economic crises were used as an excuse to give away tax incentive cuts, all kinds of race to the bottom sort of incentives to big corporations and big businesses at the expense of our local communities and local businesses. We are coming out of a crisis right now, and we're doing it with new revenue sources and a budget surplus. There needs to be a voice in the General Assembly speaking up for people in the community who have been hard hit, and making sure that they are the ones that we are supporting as we come out of the COVID crisis. I believe in public service that puts my district and my community at the forefront. That means that anything that we do has to prioritize the people who have been doing the work and bearing the burden to keep us all safe over the past year. That means our local restaurants. That means our local retailers. That means our frontline workers who have been putting in such long hours and risking their health to keep us all safe and provide us the care and the services that we need. My husband is a local contractor. I am self-employed. My dad works in the restaurant business here in Chesterfield County. My mom works in the local school system. We have a lot at stake here. And that is why I decided to run, because people with the lived experience and who have personally gone through the most difficulty over the past year deserve representation.
All righty. I'd like to thank you for the opening. Right there, let's touch on education and workforce development. Can you briefly explain your overall philosophy on K-12 education?
On K-12 education?
Yes.
Absolutely. So education, the history of education is very interesting to me, because when we first started public schools, it was just what we now think of as elementary school, because that was all the education that you needed at the time. Then we extended it to include middle school, and eventually we had the K-12 model that we have today. But today, I think that people need more training to get the good jobs in emerging industries that are out there. That means that we need to invest in things like trade schools. We need to invest in community colleges so that everybody has access to that level of higher education. We also need to invest at the beginning in a pre-K program for all Virginia's children, both so that children can get the best start in their education and so that working parents have that support when it comes to childcare. I have a son who has special needs in public schools, and I have seen the ways that it can sometimes be a struggle to accommodate the things that he needs. He has anxiety and he has an attention disorder. And rather than trying to offload those kids or tell the parents, well, then you can pay for a private school so that your kid can have their needs met, I believe that can reform our public school structure so that nobody is left behind.
Alrighty, thank you. So are you in favor of getting rid of SOLs? And what's your plan to get us away from teaching to test for the SOLs and focusing more on teaching to content and curriculums?
The thing about the SOLs is that it is trying to apply a one-size-fits-all approach to students with varying needs and varying ways of learning. To that extent, it's simply not an effective gauge of how well our kids are learning. I would believe that we need more of an emphasis on critical thinking skills, teaching children how to problem solve and how to find solutions themselves, rather than simply teaching to a test. All that these sorts of tests gauge for a child is how good they are or how well they take tests. And so that means that kids like my son are often put at a disadvantage. And unfortunately, as long as people are profiting off of being able to administer these tests, it's going to be an uphill battle to try to get rid of them altogether. But I think that there are ways that we can improve, that we can better gauge the ways that our children are learning that doesn't require us to fit the square pegs in the round hole.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen, this is Caitlin Coakley. She's running for office in the 65th District. Can you talk to us about the importance of continuing to support training centers like CCWA and other community colleges?
Absolutely. So like I said, I think that a level of higher education is vital these days to making sure that people are prepared for the workforce. And that includes trade centers, that includes community college programs, that includes anything that will help people develop themselves and reach their full potential. This provides a benefit to the entire community. We have a better educated workforce, which attracts more businesses. We have more people who are able to progress economically and get themselves out of poverty. And it just makes for a more successful community as a whole. So I believe in investing in those programs.
Already, Caitlin Coakley running for office 65th. This is the Chesterfield Chamber Delegate Forum. I'm your moderator, Mike King, of the Mike King Biz Radio Show. It's called On the Mic with Mike. Let's touch on healthcare affordability. A significant issue facing business is rising healthcare costs. Mm-hmm. One way that companies can combat healthcare costs is through group insurance plans. Do you support the expansion of group insurance plans like multiple employer welfare arrangements? Those are called MIWA sometimes, to make healthcare more affordable.
Yes, absolutely. I think that healthcare costs is a huge burden that people who are small business owners or entrepreneurs face. One of the biggest reasons why people stay in jobs that they're not passionate about or where they're not doing their best work is because they can't afford to lose their health insurance. Again, I am self-employed. My husband owns a small business. We know better than most people exactly how unaffordable health insurance can be if it's not provided to you by your employer. That's why one of the things that I'm proposing is that we further expand Medicaid in Virginia so that anybody who is self-employed or an entrepreneur can opt in, like a public option essentially. They can opt in and they can get coverage at no cost. That's going to encourage innovation. That's going to support people who are just starting out with their businesses, and that's going to help our communities grow.
On the mic with Mike. I'm sorry. This is the Chesterfield Delegate Forum. I'm so used to saying that. I am so sorry. It is Caitlin Coakley here running for office in the 65th District. Ma'am, let's touch on economic development and the business climate. Over the past several years, we've seen Virginia adopt a number of clean energy policies that increase costs for businesses. How do we balance environmentally stewardship with competitiveness of Virginia's economy?
Well, Virginia is still one of the best states to do business in. And I think that that's fantastic. But what I think that is lost in so many of these is the disproportionate impact that new regulations and new initiatives do have on smaller businesses that are operating in such a tighter margin. That's one of the reasons why in everything that I do, I prioritize those small businesses, because the big companies that come here and that do business here, they're going to be able to absorb those costs much better than this little guys. And then when they absorb the costs, they directly compete with our local businesses in a way that puts our local businesses at a disadvantage. So anytime that we are developing policy for business, we have to ask ourselves, what is the impact going to be on small business? And what can we do to help mitigate that impact? Whether it's providing new programs that those businesses can seek out, any sort of new resources that they can rely on. If there are other ways to bring down some of the costs for these small businesses to do business when it comes to things like the commercial real estate costs or the cost of healthcare, and find a way to to balance things out so that we do have a level playing field, and that we're not, putting our local businesses that build our communities, we're not putting those people at a disadvantage.
Staying with economic development, how do we recalibrate policies aimed at protecting workers' rights, particularly around worker classifications, to ensure that entrepreneurship and business growth are not stymied?
Okay, I love this question. There's a wealth of information that shows that the healthier our worker class is, the healthier our consumer class is, the better it is for business in general. And so a lot of the time when we talk about things like worker protections, like worker classifications, like wages, we talk about these as putting this disproportionate burden on small businesses. But if you actually look at the information, most small businesses already pay higher than minimum wage, and they already treat their employees better, because these are people who live and work in the areas where they have their business. These people who are working for them are their neighbors, and we want to take care of our neighbors. The people who most benefit from worker misclassification, from wages that are depressed, those are the big guys, the big box stores, the corporate retailers, the chain restaurants, the companies like Instacart and Uber that deliberately misclassify their workers, or they rely on contractor labor that they don't have to pay in order to sustain their business model. And in the cases of the corporate retailers, they rely on that cheap labor in order to keep the prices of their goods so low that they undercut the prices for the local retailers and local businesses. The more money that we put into the consumer class by investing in our workers, by providing living wages, by bringing down the cost of healthcare and housing, that's going to be money that they then spend in the community. And if more people can afford to shop local, they will shop local.
All righty, ma'am, we're going to pivot over to housing. Housing prices are invariably increasing as economic development accelerates. What's the role of state policy in ensuring the availability of affordable housing in light of population growth?
I think that we need to be more diligent about making sure that we are considering the areas in which we are developing in the ways that we are developing. In the area of Western Chesterfield, where I live, I have seen the way that it has exploded over the past decade. We have, right now we have all these new developments, and it's either a $500,000 home or it's a luxury apartment that you can't get into for less than about $1,800 a month. We are squeezing out our essential workers in this community, our teachers, our nurses, our bus drivers, our young professionals who are just starting out. And so affordable housing doesn't necessarily have to be subsidized housing, although that can be a fantastic way to address the issue. But a lot of it just comes down to smarter development and making sure that development just for the sake of it isn't having a negative impact on the people who have already lived there.
Already, Caitlin Coakley is here with us. The next question is going to be, and this is going to require we're going to decipher some acronyms for our folks out there. So it's going to be, how do we optimize the relationship between VEDP and local EDAs and IDAs to ensure that Virginia maintains its status as the best state to do business? All righty, folks, this is the part of the program where I give you some understanding of what those are. And so that for FYI, EDA is the Economic Development Authority, IDA is the Industrial Development Authority, and the VEDP is the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Well, one thing that I learned as a journalist is that to get a full picture, of an issue or something that's going on is to make sure that you're getting input from stakeholders from all perspectives. And so to that end, I don't think that the authority necessarily of any one of those entities should entirely override another. I think it should be a case where they should work together and share information so that we can make sure that we are approaching economic development in a way that actually serves Virginians. I think that the biggest problem is when we have, so often we end up with municipalities and areas that are competing against each other, and it becomes this race to the bottom where it's a case of which municipality can give away the most to try to attract that business. And that comes at the extent of our public services that people rely on. And so I think that all of those organizations, in order to get the full picture when making decisions about economic development, we should seek input from all of them, and we should come to a solution that serves everyone.
This is the Chesterfield Chamber Candidates Forum. I'm your moderator, Mike King, one of Mike with Mike on ESPN, here with Caitlin Coakley. She's running for office in the 65th District. And we're going to pivot over to state versus local authority. 39 states, including Virginia, operate under the Dillon Rule. What's your general outlook on the future of the Dillon Rule? Do you think that Virginia should expand the autonomy of allowing localities to apply for home state rule?
I think that when it comes down to the fact that localities know the communities better, and so localities should have more input in deciding what happens in their community. Sometimes when we make decisions at a state level, we're not considering the specifics of a local area, a town, or a city, and that's something that can lead us to making bad decisions that hurt the people who live there. And so, generally speaking, I'm in favor of more local authority to a point, because if it gets to a point where we have left it up to any one entity to make a decision for too long, and we see that that is having a negative effect, then it's time to step in and see where we need to kind of fill in the gaps to make sure that everyone is being taken care of.
Alrighty, Caitlin Coakley is here with us on the Mic with Mike, and we are here with the Chesterfield Chamber with the Delegate Forum. Ma'am, can we go back to education? When we talked about the mandates of the credentials, there are two, that people need to have two credentials to graduate. Can you talk and touch on that for a moment, what that means?
Sure, absolutely. I do believe that there needs to be some sort of kind of minimum standard that people are held to in terms before they're able to graduate. But again, it comes back to the fact that each child has different needs, and those needs need to be met in a way that best serves that child. This is something that becomes more difficult when we have schools that are overcrowded or we have teachers that are overworked. And so that's why it's so important for us to make sure that we're investing in our schools and making sure that every student has their needs met. It's not a case of it's not a case of lowering our standards. It's a case of making sure that those standards accurately reflect the needs of their students.
Do you, one final question, do you support tax equalization between counties and states?
I think that we can find a way to make things more equitable and more equal without doing just a one-size-fits-all approach. There does need to be some room for individuality, just because no two areas are exactly the same. But at the same time, again, we don't want it to be a situation where different municipalities are essentially competing and putting one another at a disadvantage. The wider that gap becomes, the more that we end up bringing our state ends up falling behind as a whole. So I think that there is some room to work in a middle ground there, where we can make things a little bit more equal. We can make things a little bit more uniform without trying to just make a blanket mandate for everybody.
Caitlin Coakley, we'd like to thank you for coming on. This is the Chesterfield Chamber Candidates Forum. And we're going to give you about 5 minutes or so to wrap up and let the voters know who you are, what you do, and also some words of wisdom that offer from your candidacy.
Absolutely. So to those of you who are just now listening, I'm Caitlin Coakley. I'm running in the 65th District. I'm a writer, a mom, and activist, and I am a nearly lifetime Chesterfield resident. I've been here for most of my life. I got my first job at a Taste of Italy restaurant. My dad works in local restaurants. My mom works in the school system. I am self-employed as a freelance writer, and for a lot of local businesses, I've either written their press releases and web content, or I've worked there at some point in my life as an hourly employee. I have deep ties to this area, and I want to make sure that it has the kind of representation that works as hard as all of us do. Because over the past 2 years, we have seen such a burden placed on our working families and our small businesses and our frontline workers, having to keep up with health regulations, having to keep up with virtual schooling and transferring to a virtual work environment. In some cases, businesses were closed altogether and they couldn't access the help that they needed. As we're coming out of this crisis and as we're making decisions about how to rebuild, we have to keep in mind the lessons that we have learned about the gaps in our social safety system. The gaps in our public safety net that have allowed people to slip through the cracks. We have to learn about the need for us to invest in our infrastructure, including broadband to all areas in Virginia. And we need to make sure that if we are spending money to come out of this crisis, we are doing it in such a way that prioritizes the people and not trying to give it away to big businesses in the name of economic development. I have been spending so much time on the campaign trail talking to people who are business owners and small farmers and moms and teachers and nurses, and everybody is feeling the squeeze right now. And we have the ability to make life easier for them. We have the ability to come out of this and to make a better Virginia and to make sure that we don't get into this situation again. We need new ideas, we need new leadership, and we need somebody who is willing to do the work to make their communities better. And that's what I'm offering you.
A couple of quick questions at the end here. I see right behind you, it said, old ways won't open new doors. Mm-hmm. How do we generate and inspire the next generation of folks to get involved in the political process? And also, what gives you hope?
I think the best way is to lead by example. Every time I start to get discouraged in this race, I see my neighbor's daughter who asks me questions about the campaigns and tells me that she thinks it's so cool that I'm running for office. I look at people like Abigail Spanberger and Ghazala Hashmi, neither of whom had held office before they ran, and who won and who have done such great things for this area. That gives me hope, knowing that every day there's a quote that comes to my mind. It says, if I fall 5 feet 2 inches closer to justice. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going to run this race. I am running it to win. And if I fail, then I've just moved us that much closer to the end goal.
I would like to thank you for joining us. My name is Mike King. We are here with the Chesterfield Chamber Candidate Forum. I'm going to turn it over to the leader of the Chesterfield Chamber, Danielle Fitzhugh. Thanks, ma'am.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Caitlin, for joining us. Again, our job is more about providing information to our members and the community at large so they can make an educated decision here in November. I know you have a long campaign trail ahead of you as it's getting close to the wire. Happy campaigning season, happy door knocking as you go through this race, and good luck to you in November. Thank you, Mike, for facilitating this. This is Forum 2, 3 more to go. We're getting our comfort, we're lacing up our shoes, and thanks to the community for tuning in. We will have these released next week, and we'll tag your campaigns in these as well, so you can see any comments that viewers may have or questions that you feel like you want to respond to and so forth. So thank you again for participating. We appreciate it this morning.
Alrighty, thank you.
Thank you.